What about this GST rip-off? I mean, this was a deal done under the Turnbull government. It's been carried over by the Albanese government. Why should WA be getting an extra $6 billion from all the other states when it is in the middle of a mining boom and has been for the better part of a decade, if not longer? I mean, a couple of economists, respected ones that you know, say this is a terrible deal for all of the states. Should it be torn up?
No, it shouldn't, LJ. And I think there's a balance to be struck here, and the deal that was engaged in did try to strike that balance. And that is that we want to ensure across Australia everybody has access to a reasonable equivalence of essential services. And so for decades and decades now, essentially throughout all of your lifetime and pretty much all of mine as well, we have had a situation where it's been agreed that smaller states and territories, areas that don't have the same strength of revenue, do receive higher payments. But you've got to balance that against what is fair and reasonable too. And the floor put in place for WA to ensure that around...
Per capita basis though, as Chris Minns has suggested?
No, because that would completely abandon the idea of trying to achieve equivalence of service and outcomes across Australia and is a crude measure that doesn't take into account that need for equivalence. But in the case of the West, it's not unreasonable to also say there's a flaw about making sure you do get a reasonable amount back of what you pay, and 70 cents in the dollar is not an unreasonable flaw to have in place. And so I think we got the balance there right. Of course, it is contentious between the states. As Paul Keating used to say, never stand between a state leader and a bucket of money, and they will always seek whatever dollars they can extract from Commonwealth tax revenues. But to get that balance right, to say, well, we want to make sure that nobody is unduly ripped off in terms of money taken from their state and directed elsewhere. So having a floor makes sense, but we also need to maintain that principle of having equivalence of service outcomes. So having a degree of redistribution is essential for that too.
All right, let's quickly talk Wang Yi, because this is Penny Wong's Chinese counterpart. She'll be in Australia next week. We've already had a big breakthrough on wine tariffs. What else should and can be achieved next week in your view?
Well, I welcome this visit. The resumption of dialogue has been important, and it was always counterproductive of China to cease dialogue the way that they did. If we are to see the wine tariffs removed, I hope it happens quickly and as quickly as possible. That hasn't been confirmed yet. And so confirming that, as well as getting progress for our beef industry, for our live seafood industry, for others who continue to face the unfair and unjustified imposition of trade sanctions by China. The removal of these sanctions is not something to be thankful for. They should never have been put in place in the first place. And we should be very clear that it is really only because of the trade disputes that were launched and draft findings in the case of barley and in the case of wine provided to China that clearly means they want to avoid international embarrassment. We should be clear there is no justification for anything other than full adherence to the China-Australia Free Trade Agreement. Australia adheres to it, China should adhere to it. That would see all of these barriers removed. Continuing to advocate for Dr. Yang Henjun and his well-being is crucial, particularly given the health concerns and the need to try to get a compassionate outcome in his case, as well as, of course, the really critical aspects of regional stability and security, and urging China to cease some of the provocative types of actions that we see in the South China Sea against the Philippines, but also the heightened military conduct that has occurred, be it in Japanese waters, Taiwanese waters or elsewhere.
Simon Birmingham, thanks for your time.
Thanks, LJ. My pleasure.